You're not powerful because you're present. You're powerful because you're selective. You think being available makes you strong, that showing up for everyone, replying fast, being always on makes you reliable, respected, untouchable. But it doesn't. It makes you visible, trackable, predictable. And predictable is controllable. Because when they know where you are, how you think, how you'll respond, they don't have to fight you. They don't control you. They anticipate you. Because you taught them how. Cold mind doesn't chase consistency. It builds leverage through intentional disconnection. Not emotional distance. Not disappearing to punish. But stepping back to cut the code that keeps you too exposed to be effective. When you're always present, you're always being pulled. But when you choose your absence, you become unreadable. And unreadable is unmovable. Power doesn't live in visibility. It lives in timing. And sometimes, the coldest move is to not be there at all. Constant presence destroys gravity. Predictability kills power. You think being available makes you trustworthy, that showing up all the time builds respect, that always being on keeps you in control. But cold mind sees it differently. Constant presence isn't influence, it's exposure. The more often they see you, the more familiar you become. And the more familiar, the easier you are to read, to predict, to shape. Every reply you rush, every reaction you give, every status update you post is another data point for someone else to use to frame who you are. You think you're building connection, but you're leaking calibration, because when people can map you, they can manage you. And when you don't withdraw long enough to recalibrate from their rhythm, you don't realize how much of your behavior has become reaction dressed up as routine. You text fast because you're afraid of being seen as cold. You post often because you're afraid of being forgotten. You speak constantly because silence feels like you're losing space. But presence without frame is just performance on repeat. Cold mind doesn't fear absence. It understands that space creates structure. It knows that distance builds gravity. And the more strategic you are with your presence, the more weight you carry when you do appear. The more they can access you, the more they expect you. And expectation always breaks mystique. You're not leading, you're sinking. And that's the loop. You think you're staying in control because you're staying in the loop. Answering fast, responding quickly, always present, always engaged. But cold mind sees what's actually happening. You're not leading, you're sinking. Your nervous system is locking onto every emotional fluctuation around you and adjusting to match it. Not because it's smart, but because it's automatic. Here's the loop. You show up. You sense pressure to be understood, liked, approved. You speak quickly, soften tone, keep peace. You stay visible, just to feel less disposable. They learn how to read you. You become predictable. Your presence no longer shifts the room. It blends into it. And now, you're not directing the frame. You're servicing it. Because presence without pause becomes default, and default becomes exploitable. But cold mind doesn't run on default. It runs on design. And design says, if you never disappear, you can't reset expectation. Disconnection isn't a withdrawal. It's a reset point. It breaks rhythm. It scrambles predictability. It gives the system time to forget how to frame you. So when you return with gravity, not familiarity. Don't fear being forgotten. Fear being expected. If they always know where to find you, they'll stop listening when you arrive. Power fades when presence becomes predictable. Intentional disconnection. How to vanish without losing. Frame. Disconnection isn't weakness. It's warfare. But only when done right. Cold mind doesn't disappear to escape. It disappears to restructure. Here's how it works. Phase 1. Cut visibility. You don't announce your absence. You don't warn anyone. You just pull the signal. Quietly. You stop broadcasting. You stop reacting. You remove yourself from the feedback loops that were keeping you calibrated to noise you didn't choose. This doesn't mean isolation. It means unplugging from emotional gravity you never consented to. The moment you stop responding, the system starts adjusting. Phase 2. Recenter without interference. Now you're out of the frame. The noise fades. The pressure drops. And here, you can finally see what thoughts are actually yours, what emotions were reactive, what rhythms weren't built for you. Cold mind doesn't fill the space. It listens to what emerges when no one else is shaping it. Because in disconnection, you don't just find clarity. You find origin. Phase 3. Return with shifted gravity. You reappear, but quieter, sharper, less explainable. You don't reintroduce yourself. You let the absence speak for itself. Now, when you enter a space, you don't feel pulled. Because your nervous system is no longer trying to keep the peace. It's setting the tone. And the people who once mapped you can't find you in the same coordinates because you didn't return louder. You returned less accessible. Intentional disconnection isn't about hiding. It's about rebuilding the edge you lost by staying visible too long. Strategic absence isn't quiet. It's a recalibration so powerful. They feel the shift before you say a word. He disconnected without warning. When he returned, no one could read him. He used to be everywhere, always replying, always in the group chats, always visible. He thought consistency meant presence, that showing up meant staying respected. But over time, he realized something deeper. The more they saw him, the less they listened. The more available he became, the easier he was to overlook. So one day, no announcement, no post, no dramatic exit. He just vanished, pulled the plug, from socials, from conversations, from the loops that kept him synced with a version of himself that wasn't strategic anymore. People noticed. They messaged. Everything okay? What happened? He didn't respond, because this wasn't a reaction. It was a reset. 30 days. No updates. No reach-outs. Just silence. But inside the silence, he wasn't fading. He was restructuring, clarifying what his presence had become, stripping away where he'd been leaking power, and most importantly, training his system to stop needing external signals to stay grounded. And when he came back, he didn't say much, no explanation, no summary of where he'd been. No, "Hey guys, I'm back." He just reappeared, with less effort, but more gravity. Now, when he spoke, the room paused. When he moved, people tracked. Not because he demanded it, but because his absence retrained their expectation. He didn't raise his value, he reclaimed it. That's intentional disconnection in motion, not disappearing to disappear, but disappearing to reset the terms of your presence. He didn't come back with more content. He came back with less access, and that changed everything. Final message. Disappear strategically. Reappear unreadable. You don't lose relevance when you disappear. You lose predictability. And that's exactly the point. Because power doesn't need to be seen. It needs to be unavailable just long enough for people to notice the silence. When you're always present, you're always accessible. And what's accessible becomes routine, expected, taken for granted. cold mind doesn't fear absence. It uses it. You step away not because you're broken, but because the loop was too familiar, too scripted, too easy to read. So you cut signal, not to punish, not to test, but to rebuild privacy in a world that consumes your presence by default. And when you return, you don't need to explain. The shift speaks for itself. Now they don't just see you, they sense weight. Because what was once constant has become selective. And what's selective can no longer be controlled. In the next video, we'll reveal why childhood praise programs, weakness, how being rewarded for being good turned you into someone who needed permission to be powerful. Subscribe, exit the room, let gravity return with you.